Wistoria, wand and sword begins at a school called Rigarden Magical Academy. There, the narrator tells the audience that this school favors those with incredible magical talent. Then, we see our protagonist while entering a dungeon and fighting a beast. The narrator wonders if talentless people can advance at this academy. Will vows to answer that question by slaying dungeon monsters. Next, Will attends class with his familiar, Kiki. Professor Edward, Will's teacher, asks him to come to the front of the class to perform a fire spell on some balka ore. Unfortunately, Will can't perform the spell and his classmates laugh at him. Sion, another student, performs the spell instead from his seat. Edward yells at Sion for performing the spell and reminds the class that the supremacy of magic is absolute. Additionally, Edward says those who lack magical capabilities are unfit to attend Rigarden. After class, Sion, accompanied by his buddies Lyril and Gordon, scolds Will for his pitiful spell attempt in class. Then, another classmate, Colette, arrives and tells Sion to stop bullying Will. Sion argues that Will should abandon his hopes of becoming a skilled mage, let alone a Maja Vander. He argues hard work and kindness won't help him achieve these things. Will, Colette, and Kiki wander the halls and discuss Colette's dislike of Edward, Sion, and the others' treatment of Will. Will tells Colette he's okay and is happy someone's sticking up for him. The two look up at the sky and Will delves into detail about their world's origins and who the Maja Vander are. He says invaders called the Celestial Host terrorized this world. However, 5 wizards thwarted the Celestial Host's plans by setting up a seal over their world's sky. Will confirms the strongest wizards can earn the Maja Vander title. Then, Colette brings up Elfaria, the Ice Maiden's wand, and wonders if she is watching over them. We receive a scene featuring Elfaria looking outside a window. Will is certain Elfaria's observing them from this window. Next, we receive a flashback featuring a young Will and Elfaria. The two discuss their shared dream of seeing a gorgeous sunset together. However, to achieve this shared dream of theirs, Elfaria suggests she and Will become a Maja Vander. The two promise to see it together one day. Then, Will monologues about Elfaria, stating how she became a Maja Vander at a young age due to her exceptional skills. Although Will isn't as talented as Elfaria, he vows to fulfill his promise to Elfaria one day. Next, Will apologizes to Professor Werkner for entering a dangerous dungeon. Nonetheless, Werkner awards Will 2 credits for bringing in an evil guard specimen. Then, Werkner tells Will that if he wants to ascend the tower like other Maja Vander, he must advance to the Upper Institute. Werkner says Will must improve his writing, spell work, and praxis skills. Unfortunately, Werkner doesn't see Will earning spellwork credits because Will can't use magic. Will argues that focusing his effort on praxis will help him achieve his goal, but Werkner shoots that method down. Nevertheless, Werkner tells Will he should focus more on trying to graduate than becoming a Maja Vander. Noticing Will's concerns, Werkner tells Will that there have been reports of a Baskerville causing issues on the dungeon's 6th floor. He also knows no one's slain the creature yet. Will thanks Werkner for this intel. While Will's thanking Werkner, Sion eavesdrops on their conversation and heads to the 6th floor dungeon to deal with the Baskerville. Then, we see Will and Sion's respective groups exploring the dungeon's 6th floor. Internally, Sion argues people like Will shouldn't think of becoming Maja Vanders nor attend academies like Rigarden. Then, a sentinel, a different type of beast in this world, attacks one of Sion's comrades, causing the other to scream. Will hears Sion's allies cry and rushes to the scene. He's surprised by the sentinel's presence and says slaying one will earn you 10 credits. Moreover, Will sees Sion in danger and wonders if he should save him despite all the mean things Sion has done to him. Then, Will puts on some goggles Elfaria gave him in the past and attacks the sentinel with his sword. Later, Edward visits Werkner and tells him to send his familiar to the dungeon's 6th floor. Edward tells him Sion went to the dungeon's 6th floor without permission. Werkner tells Edward not to fear because the former knows Will's there too. Werkner uses his crystal ball to show Edward what's happening on the dungeon's 6th floor. The men see Will holding off the sentinel. Edward and Sion can't believe Will's putting up a great effort. Werkner tells Edward that Will is a mage with superhuman strength, a robust physique, and wonderful observational skills. The former says with one slash of Will's sword, he can land a blow that surpasses lightning. Will attacks the sentinel with this sword. Edward leaves Werkner's office infuriated, and Sion shares a similar reaction when Will extends a helping hand to him. Will returns to Werkner's office, and the latter awards him with 10 credits. The episode closes with Will telling the audience how this anime, wistoria, wand and sword, began. Years earlier, we see how terrible Will felt as everyone whispered behind his back. They had never heard of someone who couldn't use magic like him, and everyone wondered how he got into the magical academy. Many assumed he was used as bait to lure his friend Ilaria to the school. By then, Ilaria had already become Aji Vander, so the other students assumed Will would be expelled from the academy. Will went to meet with Headmaster Cauldron, who silently handed him a dagger. She prepared an attack, and Will sprang into action, pushing Dubiner to safety and neutralizing Cauldron's attack with just the dagger before Dubiner hit the ground. Both Cauldron and Dubiner were stunned by Will's skill, prompting Cauldron to laugh and declare that Will would continue attending the academy. Dubiner reminded her that Will couldn't use magic, but Cauldron was intrigued by Will's determination, comparing him to a sword yearning to be a wand. Despite her encouraging words, Will seemed unhappy, wondering if he would be able to ascend the tower and be with Ilaria if he continued his studies. Cauldron gave him hope, saying that if he remained undaunted and strong, he might achieve his goal. After he left, Cauldron admitted she had no clue how things would end for Will, the sword attempting to become a wand. In the present, Dubiner lectures his students about ascending the tower, which generally means advancing to the upper institute to become one of the Magi of Vander, who reign from the topmost floor. A person must be recognized by the highest center of learning, achieved by either creating a new type of magic or earning at least 7,200 credits at the academy. Since creating a new type of magic is rare, most students rely on earning credits. Dubiner admonishes his students for not even doing well enough to graduate, let alone reach the upper institute. After class, Colette sees how exhausted Will is and mentions how everyone is talking about how tough Professor Dubiner's class was. Dubiner is especially tough on Will because he has completely failed at spellwork. Will, however, refuses to be deterred, believing that being a failure doesn't mean he shouldn't work hard. Will is grateful for Dubiner's supplemental classes, unlike professors like Edward, who don't seem to care. Will and Colette overhear Shin's friends talking about how Shin defeated an evil sentinel all by himself. Although his friends were overwhelmed, Shin had slain the sentinel alone, earning the belief that he would become one of the top 3 at the school. However, Shin is furious, knowing the real story and rushing to confront Will, whom he considers a talentless loser yet fought well. Colette breaks up the altercation, and Will keeps what happened in the headmaster's office a secret. Edward demands that Will be expelled, but Cauldron points out that Will is in his 6th and final year at the school, and it would be cruel to expel him now. Edward argues that the academy doesn't need someone who is a warrior, not a mage. Cauldron checks Will's grades, showing he excels in everything except magic, and will have several paths to choose from outside of being a Magi of Vander. She declares that the academy must produce great scholars for something called the Fated Day. Despite Edward's objections, she instructs him to personally administer Will's test. If Will fails, she will entrust his expulsion to Edward. Even Edward is surprised by her decision, but she remains confident in her choice, believing Edward is the best for the job due to his deep understanding of the Magi of Vander. Will apologizes to Colette for always needing her help with magic-related tasks, like opening his magic-locked locker. Colette doesn't mind and notices he keeps his sword in his locker, which he has never been given permission to carry on campus. In the study hall, Will writes a report about a favorite battle involving dwarves who, despite severe mistreatment, raised an army, and waged a war. Colette wishes he wouldn't work so hard, but Will explains he needs every credit to advance to the upper institute. He relates to the dwarves' determination, taught to him by Professor Dubiner, believing it's necessary to overcome magic. Edward interrupts Will and Colette, instructing Will to come to the spell hall for a supplemental lesson. Will is shocked when Edward uses a magic attack against him, explaining that Will's assignment is to land a single strike on him. Refusal is not an option, but if Will succeeds, he will receive his first ever spellwork credits. If Will fails, he will be expelled. Edward prepares his next attack, declaring that those without talent should not be allowed to look at the magia vander. Will decides to fight, and the battle begins. Back in the headmaster's office, Cauldron tells Dubiner about Edward's test, forbidding him from interfering. She acknowledges Dubiner's advocacy for Will, but must also consider Edward's concerns. She has decided that Edward will ascertain whether Will is worthy of becoming a magia vander. Dubiner struggles with the cruelty of her choice, knowing Edward is the closest person to becoming a magia vander. Edward demonstrates his fearsome abilities, and Will is shocked by the power he generates using low-level dark magic. Will shows incredible speed, but Edward's defense is impregnable. Edward mocks Will for kicking a magical shield and knocks him back with a powerful attack, casting spells with no incantations. Will realizes he can't even scratch Edward, and Kiki, his familiar, runs off. Edward announces he will only use his black flames to burn Will and his shield to repel Will's attacks. Edward prepares a barrage of attacks, declaring that talentless people should disappear. Will is struck several times, realizing he can't beat Edward. Colette worries about Will after hearing he was going to have lessons with Edward. She is surprised when she sees Kiki, injured but scratching at Will's locker, and urgently opens it. Edward forces Will down, angrily revealing that one mage ended a rebellion of 10,000 dwarves with a simple spell. He demands Will abandon his aspirations, but Will refuses, declaring he wants to be with the person he loves. This shocks Edward, who refuses to believe that love drives Will to reach for the apex of magic. Will doesn't care how difficult the path will be, and is determined to see the sunset with Ilaria. Colette arrives just in time and gives Will his sword. Will thanks her and prepares for a real fight. Edward calls Will a deviant, promising to defeat him as he unleashes another attack. Will slices through Edward's magic, revealing he's using an Aoria blade. Edward launches another attack, but Will maneuvers through it, thinking about the Dwarven War. Will launches a brick at Edward's barrier, shattering it, and uses the ceiling as a launching pad to break through Edward's barrier. The battle reaches its dramatic conclusion as both fighters point their weapons at each other. Edward is stunned and furious when he realizes Will cut him, awarding Will 5 credits. Colette runs to check on Will, who is exhausted. Cauldron is impressed, and Dubiner points out that Will used a powerful slashing attack capable of overcoming magic. Kun declares that Will was truly undaunted. Episode 3 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword, begins with a flashback we received from a previous episode. In it, Elfaria tells Will he's a brave and kind person. Then, Elfaria gives Will the goggles we see him wear in the present timeline. Will promises Elfaria they'll see the sunset together in the future. Elfaria looks forward to it. Elfaria heads to the tower and Will cries. Workner arrives and Will says this will be the last time he cries. In the present, Will delivers newspapers to several residents' homes. While working, Will trips and drops his newspaper stack. Will picks them up and reads a news story about Elfaria's magic creation activities. Next, Will learns the Upper Institute passed a new order. Will's surprised that Elfaria is responsible for this order. This entices Will to return to his dorm. There, Will asks Rosti to make him a magic item because Elfaria sent an order to collect Frost Walker ice cores. Will says all contributing students will receive rewards. However, Will needs Rosti's magic items if he hopes to succeed. Rosti hands Will the magic items and wishes Will good luck. Will heads to the 4th floor and notices several students, Sion included, defeating frost walkers. Next, Will sees large penguin monsters scaring a girl. Will saves the girl and she thanks him. We learn her name is Iris. Then, we cut away to Werkner lecturing his students about magic. One of the students named Rose asks Werkner if he believes Elfaria is an astounding mage since she developed her own magic. Werkner says Elfaria is a remarkable mage, possibly the best. Rose teases Colette because she has a hunch Colette's jealous that Will looks up to Elfaria. Colette yells at Rose, but internally, she knows Will's exploring the dungeon's 4th floor because he wants to see Elfaria again. Then, we cut away to Will and Iris. They're still exploring the dungeon's 4th floor. Iris says she wants to become useful to the Maja Vander. Also, Iris says she wants to hold up the real sky one day. Will explains what Iris meant by the real sky. He says their current sky is a fabricated one called the Great Barrier. Will says that Maja Vander created the Great Barrier by using a tremendous amount of magic. Additionally, Will says the world will be enveloped in darkness when the barrier falls and the calamity will proceed. Then, Iris tells Will she met Elfaria in the past. Iris claims Elfaria saved Iris from monsters, and this fueled her desire to pursue the goals she mentioned earlier. Will investigates the area and senses a strong frost walker ahead. He tells Iris that even though he lacks magical talent like her and the others, he has vast experience and research skills. The two enter this frost walker's domain and encounter a frost rex instead. Iris claims this is a powerful beast that's worth 6 credits. She reminds Will that physical attacks won't harm the frost rex due to its abilities. Will reveals Rosty's magic items and tells Iris he can defeat the frost rex. With his sheer athleticism, Rosty's items, and a spell, Will defeats the frost rex. Iris is surprised by Will's performance. Then, Iris responds to Will's victory strangely, indicating that she's up to something nefarious. Iris wonders if she should report Will's victory to an undisclosed party. Then, Will shows Iris that he's obtained a lot of ice cores from the frost rex. Will suggests they regroup with the others so they can properly deliver these cores to the people who requested them. Iris complies. Later, Iris goes for a stroll through Mercedes Collies's wizard tower. Iris meets with several Maja Vander named Carriot, Zio, and Eleanor. Elfaria is present there too. Carriot tells Iris that they're holding a boring meeting. Eleanor is concerned they won't have enough warriors for the Fated Day event and fears history will repeat itself. Zio deems Iris the Maja Vander's watcher and asks her if she found someone who'll help them prevent the Fated Day event from happening. Iris recommends they recruit Will. While some argue Will would be a great candidate, others don't. Before Eleanor and Zio clash, Carriot suggests they wait for the Grand Magic Festival event. Carriot argues they can make a solid choice then. He, Eleanor, and Zio depart, leaving Iris and Elfaria alone. Iris tells Elfaria that Will is an exceptional warrior. Elfaria summons a crystal before her. The episode closes with Elfaria saying Will's name and smiling. Episode 4 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword begins with Sion, Colette, and others participating in a magic exam to earn credits. Will is also participating in the event. However, Will is struggling to keep up with the others. Then, we see 3 prolific students named Lahanna, Wignall, and Julius earn themselves credits during this exam. Julius confronts Wignall and Lahanna and hopes to challenge them one day. Wignall and Lahanna look forward to it and depart. Next, Julius and his buddies stumble upon Will and ridicule him. One of them mentions the Grand Magic Festival, and Will remembers its existence. Later, Colette joins Will at the cafeteria. Colette tells Will he needs someone to scout him at the Grand Magic Festival. Will understands and explains what the Grand Magic Festival is to the audience. Then, Colette informs Will about the 4 tower factions and their connections to the Maja Vander. Colette tells Will if one of the factions chooses him, he'll get closer to achieving his goals. She also brings up Watchers who occasionally give students another opportunity to reach the tower. Will understands but lists why he doesn't want to go through with Colette's suggestion. Then, Colette and Will head to their lockers. Colette senses something amiss and investigates. She informs Will about an inhibitor and a sound-dampening barrier that's nearby. Colette uses Kiki's magic to break it. The three notice a hidden stairway that leads to an underground location. They head down the stairs, only to discover several students gambling on who'll claim victory in the Grand Magic Festival. Will and Colette spot Sion and discuss people like Lihanna, Wignall, and others with him. Some time passes. Before Will leaves class, Colette stops Will. She wants to go to the dungeon with him, but Will says he's working at Gina's tavern tonight. We cut away to Will working at Gina's tavern. He's serving the dwarven customers beverages. One of the customers discusses the Grand Magic Festival with Will. Will says he may not participate in it. Gina tells Will to stay focused like Rosti. Rosti is also working for Gina. Later, Will and Rosti discuss Will's wages and why it'd be better for him to find a new job. Will understands but argues that he likes chatting with the dwarven customers. Then, Julius and his buddies arrive. They share cruel words about Gina's tavern's environment and its customers. Julius demands the workers bring him food and refreshments. Will informs the audience about the dwarves' status in this world. He argues if dwarves were to lay hands on mages, it'd only make things worse for their race. Will confronts Julius and his buddies and tells them to apologize. Julius and his allies refuse. Will knocks Julius's companions out. Julius uses his ice magic to intimidate Will. Before Julius harms Will, Julius notices Will's resolve. This persuades Julius to leave Will alone. Julius orders Will to enter the Grand Magic Festival. He wants to humiliate Will at the competition. Will accepts. The episode ends with Will wanting Julius to apologize to the dwarves if Will wins. Episode 5 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword begins with Colette and Will resting at the capital of Magic Stadium's athlete waiting room area. A woman named Mercedes gives a speech and the Grand Magic Festival begins. Several students comment on the competition's sky race. They believe Lihanna will win the sky race. Meanwhile, Mercedes and Iris discuss the scouts hidden amongst the audience. Iris departs and tells Mercedes she has her eyes on a specific participant. Next, Sion heads to the waiting room area. Colette told Sion to meet her there because she wants him to join her team. Upon Sion's arrival, he notices Will next to Colette. Sion's not thrilled about Will being here. Colette reminds Sion that for the crown attack competition, they must have a team with at least 21,000 combined credits. Julius and his friends walk past Will, Sion, and Colette. Colette tells Sion Julius and Will aren't on good terms for some reason. After a few words from Maius and Edward, several elves perform a spell to kick off the crown attack competition. Essentially, the elves create several zones for the participants to traverse through. Maius discusses the differences between each domain. Also, Maius discusses the item our participants must claim to achieve victory. He says there are many obstacles the participants must overcome in each domain and lists other things they can do to mess with fellow participants. Maius points out some of the participants who will be competing in the event, with Will being one of them. Many students laugh at Will and can't believe he'd enter the competition. Then, Maius starts the event. Julius and his team run toward the block obstacles and the blocks transform into golems. Will, Colette, and Sion rush toward the golems. Colette uses her magic to give Will a fist-like device called a gauntlet. Will uses the gauntlet to crush the golems in his way, much to the audience's surprise. Then, we receive a brief scene of Sion reflecting on his Frost Walker experience with Will. After that, we return to the Crown Attack event. Will and his comrades continue pushing through the obstacles in their way in the Badlands zone. Some folks praise Will while others argue Colette's magic is helping him persevere through this event. Regardless, Maius informs everyone that other squads aren't doing well in the event. Will and his friends reach the final zone. We learn Edward set up the traps here. Will and his team conquer the obstacles. Internally, Will shares what he plans to do when he reaches the event's crown. the item he needs to get to win the crown attack event. He knows things will get hasty near their objective. Will wants to set up an ambush to thwart Julius's efforts. Unfortunately, Julius attacks Will, but Will avoids harmful damage. Will and Julius clash. Sion interrupts their duel with his fire spell. After that, Sion tells Julius to leave the area. Colette learns Sion was aiming for Will and Julius. Julius attacks Colette with ice magic and Sion uses the opportunity to attack Will. Will loses the gauntlet and his sword. Sion tells Will to pick up his sword and fight him. The episode ends with both characters staring at each other. Episode 6 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword begins with Sion informing the audience of his negative views of Will. He argues that Will was so pathetic that he had to step in to make him look less pitiful. In the past, Sion tried recruiting Will as an underling, but Will refused. Sion argues this made him despise Will. We return to the present timeline. Sion and Will continue fighting each other. Then, we return to the capital of Magic Stadium. Maus informs the crowd about Will's team's strange developments. Edward chimes in. He argues the Grand Magic Festival's Tower Scouts won't approve of Will and his team's decision to fight each other. Meanwhile, Rosti and Kiki are worried about Will. Iris arrives and sits next to Rosti and Kiki. She says she's cheering for Will because someone told her about him. Rosti's shocked that Will is becoming more popular. Meanwhile, Colette tries fleeing to Will's side. However, Julius prevents her from regrouping with Will. The two fight. Then, we learn Julius somehow cloned himself during the competition. Julius's clones appear in the Crown Attack competition's different domains. Wignall confronts one of Julius's clones. He defeats one of the clones and picks up an ice shard it left behind. After we receive comments from different spectators, we return to following Will and Sion's duel. Then, we receive a montage depicting Will getting bullied by his peers. Will narrates during the montage. He knows he's a failure and doesn't want to feel accepted. All Will wants is for everyone to leave him alone. Then, we return to his fight with Sion. Sion summons a fiery falcon and forces it to attack Will. Will plans to chop down the falcon so he can reach Sion. Then, Will successfully defends himself, but Sion's magical capabilities catch the audience's attention. Then, Sion and Will argue with each other. Will tells Sion he resents him, but he wants to focus his efforts on defeating Julius. Sion lists what he hates about Will to Will. He can't stand that Will gives everyone but Sion attention. Will understands and gives Sion a proper battle. Will defeats Sion's falcon and attempts to land a blow on Sion. Colette intervenes and stops the boys' fight. She tells Will she defeated Julius and he disappeared on her. Colette scolds Sion after he comments on her tattered attire. Will places his jacket on Colette, grabs his sword, and leaves the area. He promises Sion that they can have a proper duel next time. Julius and his entourage arrive at the crown. Before Julius grabs it, Will arrives. The episode ends with Will challenging Julius to a fight. Episode 7 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword begins with a woman named Sarissa greeting Elfaria. Sarissa slaps Elfaria on the head and tells Elfaria to take her Maja Vander status seriously. Sarissa places a document in front of Elfaria. She tells Elfaria it features candidates the scouts want Elfaria to choose for the Ice faction. The first candidate is Julius, and Sarissa argues he could be her successor one day. Elfaria doesn't argue against that claim. Then, we cut away to Will and Julius. Julius and Will don't intend to lose. They start fighting each other. Will struggles to fight Julius and his party. Julius taunts Will, and Will learns he's been fighting 4 of Julius's ice clones. One of Julius's clones explodes, entrapping Will in an ice prison. Werkner, Edward, and others realize Julius learned one of Elfaria's 12 greatest spells. Julius explains he learned this spell naturally and plans to expose Elfaria to the world. Will breaks free from his ice prison and attempts to fight Julius again. Julius traps Will in another prison. He conjures a large ice shard and uses this shard to attack Will. Julius boasts to the audience, and many audience members praise Julius for his efforts. Will frees himself and swiftly knocks out Julius's friends. Julius's clones collapse, and Will exposes Julius. Julius kept the clones intact with his friends' support. Then, we receive an extended scene of Alfaria's conversation with Sarissa. Although Alfaria doesn't deny Julius's potential, Alfaria says she wants a lone sword at her side, alluding to Will. Will continues shattering Julius's pride. Enraged, Julius summons more clones and attacks Will. Julius knows he can't control more than 4 clones at a time without his allies' support. Moreover, Julius says he can only hold a defense position. However, Julius argues that Will won't be able to tell who the true Julius is. Then, Will attacks the real Julius and explains how he found that intel out. Will tells Julius he and Alfaria grew up together, so he dedicated time to understanding her magic. Enraged, Julius summons 8 clones and plans to defeat Will. Despite the odds, Will defeats the clones and knocks out Julius. After that, Wignall and his party arrive at the crown attack competition. Wignall grabs the crown, puts it on his head, and wins the competition. Meanwhile, Alfaria asks Sarissa if spells exist that can change the past or delete memories. Sarissa says there aren't any spells. Alfaria wanted to know because she didn't want Will to think she was tormenting him with her clones in the past. Colette runs toward Will. Will apologizes for letting Wignall get the crown. The episode ends with Will raising his fist in the air, stating that he's glad he kept his promise. The episode begins with Donnan and his dwarf friends congratulating Will, Colette, and others for their performance at the Grand Magic Festival competition. After that, Colette tells Donnan that their team didn't win, nor did anyone get scouted. Colette blames Sion for ruining their chances. Donnan understands, but he's happy Will defeated Julius. Then, we cut away to Julius. He's working for Gina since the dwarves want him to perform labor work. The dwarves will only accept his apology through physical labor. Julius runs around the place embarrassed. Meanwhile, Colette confronts Werkner about Will. Colette wonders if people will treat Will differently after the competition. Werkner argues they will. Later, several students confront Will. They want Will to join their party since the upcoming all-student praxis event is coming up. This event involves the students exploring a dungeon for a week. Colette intervenes. She argues that Will shouldn't join anyone's party after the harsh treatment he endured from many of them before the Grand Magic Festival competition occurred. However, Will disagrees. Will adores the love people are sending his way. Colette intervenes again and tells everyone she and Will have plans tomorrow. Rose and Colette discuss Colette's date with Will. Meanwhile, Rosti asks Will if he plans to visit the dungeon tomorrow since they don't have school. Will says he and Colette are going shopping tomorrow since he wants to pick up some gear. Will greets Colette and compliments her on her attire. Then, Rosti arrives and introduces himself to Colette. Will tells Colette why Rosti is tagging along with them. Rosti and Will hold hands and Rosti turns around and makes a funny face at Colette. We receive a montage of Rosti interfering with Colette's chances of getting close to Will. Later, Colette confronts Will about his relationship with Rosti. Will informs Colette about Rosti's quirky side and antics. Rosti arrives with drinks and gets closer to Will. Colette and Rosti insist that Will head somewhere. Rosti tells Colette that he loves Will. Rosti and Colette argue about Will to see who is more deserving of him. Then, Lehanna stops Will, asking him to go someplace with her. Will and Lehanna arrive at a tea house location. Wignall, Julius, and Sion are inside. Lehanna wants Will to join her and the others party for the all-student praxis event. She shares her reasons why and Wignall backs Lehanna up. Even though the Lightning faction reached out to Lehanna after the festival, Lehanna feels she's still inferior. Lehanna discusses her family, giving Will context on her family's short-lived existence and need for swift accomplishments. Lehanna wants to become a Maja Vander. After Lehana finishes speaking, Wignall, Sion, Julius, and Will decide to join her all-student praxis party. Then, we cut away to Werkner lecturing his students about the all-student praxis event. Since it's 10 days away, Werkner says their school's dungeon's 7th to 10th floors will be unlocked, allowing students to defeat monsters and earn many credits. Then, Edward lectures the students about the event, telling them it's possible some students could die. Some time passes. Will and his classmates arrive at the all-student praxis event. Colette says she'll be attending it because she wants to be by Will's side. Rosti bumps into Will and Colette and informs Will he can't participate in this event. Will understands and thanks Rosti for supplying him with magic items. Then, Edward lectures the students on the event again and tells them it's begun. The episode ends with two men slaughtering someone at an undisclosed location. Episode 9 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword begins with a man named Logwell informing Carriot that the all-student praxis event is happening this year. Carriot tells Logwell that he doesn't want to represent all the factions in this universe. Logwell lists negative things about the lightning, elves, and ice wands. He argues that in Cyndia, the Flame Emperor's wand is the most suitable. Then, we return to the all-student praxis event site. One of the proctors informs all participating students that the event has begun. Lehana, Will, and their other party members reach a specific area. They encounter a swarm of crimson ants. Before Will acts, Lehana rushes into battle. Wignall informs Will about Lehana's lineage and claims she's a rare mage who is great in close-quarters combat. Lehana defeats the ants. She tells the others she wants to reach the praxis's final destination swiftly. Then, we receive a flashback of Werkner telling Will that search magic is the best. Will realizes why it's the best during the praxis event after Julius defeats an enemy before his eyes. Will is concerned everyone will defeat all the monsters before he can have a shot at doing so. Wignall doubts Will's usefulness, but Lehana argues Will defeat the over 5-level monsters. However, Lehana has doubts about Will's usefulness, too. Will starts doubting himself as he and his team explore new locales and defeat monsters. Eventually, Lehana and the others reach a rocky location. Wignall casts a fire illusion spell to shield him and his allies from danger. Lehana asks Will to distribute food to everyone. Wignall refuses to let Will touch him because he doesn't deem Will worthy. Will places Wignall's meal on the ground, and Colette's not happy with Wignall's distrust in Will. Wignall only deems Lehana worthy. Will tells Colette not to pursue the discussion further and reflects on how skilled elves are in his universe. He cites the Elven Queen as a great example. Lehana tells her comrades they must defeat the luminous Nabarus. She wants to defeat the Nabarus first and handle the leftover monsters later. We cut away to the pair from the previous episode's cliffhanger. One is unnamed while the other is possibly named Headless. They murdered some monsters and participants. The two discuss Headless's actions and laugh. We return to following our main group. They arrive at the Praxis event's 10th floor. Julius knows they took a shorter route to get here and is confused about how another party arrived at this place first. Lehana and the others find the Nabarus and realize someone killed it. In a flashback, Werkner tells Will that search magic has flaws. Werkner states how mages and monsters can work around search magic and what search magic cannot detect. Then, a giant unnamed monster attacks Wignall. Wignall and the others fall and land on the Praxis event's 11th floor. This results in everyone getting split up into groups of 2. Julius and Sion state only high-level mages can enter this domain. Meanwhile, Colette rushes toward Lehana because she got injured during the fall. Lehana tells Colette she'll be fine. She wants to regroup with everyone. Then, we enter a flashback. This flashback features several elves, including the Elven Queen, ridiculing a young Wignall for his poor illusion magic skills. We learn the Elven Queen's name is Eleanor from this flashback. Will wants to offer Wignall aid in the present. Wignall refuses Will's help, but asks him to hand him medical supplies. Will tells Wignall he wants to look for Colette and the others. He explains why this is the best course of action. We cut away to Werkner chatting with Professor Eliza. Eliza updates Werkner on what's happening on the 8th floor. She fears people on floors 9 and above are enduring similar obstacles. Edward calls off the praxis competition and wants Werkner to assist him in discovering what caused this anomaly. Meanwhile, Will and Wignall explore the 11th floor. Will tells Wignall not to use search magic and lists reasons why. He goes over a plan with Wignall and explains why he can remain calm during desperate times like this. Then, several pig-like monsters Jurgisa stumble upon Will and Wignall. Wignall struggles to fight a Jurgisa, so Will swoops in to defeat it. Will explains why Wignall's illusion magic wasn't effective against the Jurgisa. He then compliments Wignall. The episode ends with Wignall admitting he's not as skilled as others claim him to be. The episode begins with Wignall casting spells in an undisclosed area. Wignall's also calling out Eleanor's name. Then, we return to following Will and Wignall in the present timeline. Wignall says all the elves have ascended the tower beside him. Wignall says his illusion magic lacks substance and is merely for show. Even though Wignall is regarded as one of the top 3 students, he argues he's inferior. Lehanna discusses this topic with Colette at the same time. She says the other 2 and herself aren't viewed highly outside their academy. Wignall tells Will he was raised alongside Eleanor and held a deep affection for her. However, Wignall argues Eleanor was an exceptional mage and rose through the ranks faster than he anticipated. Wignall trained effortlessly to reach Eleanor's status. However, Wignall tells Will that his efforts were futile. Will tells Wignall he and Wignall aren't so different. He promises to protect Wignall until he's strong enough to handle things himself. Will and Wignall continue progressing. Both defeat many monsters, and Wignall wonders why Will hasn't abandoned him like his kin have. Will tells Wignall it's because he knows he's not a mean elf. Kiki senses a monster in the area, but Wignall can't trace its whereabouts with his search magic. Will argues the dungeon is giving birth to monsters. The dungeon gives birth to fire creatures called Balkars. These are known for being resistant to magic. Will argues elven illusion magic works on them. He hopes Wignall can support him. Wignall tells Will to abandon that idea, so Will shares encouraging words Wignall's way. Wignall reflects on Will's words. The former feels he and Will are different despite their similar dreams. Wignall attempts to help Will, but the Balkars overcome his illusion magic. Kiki supports Will, and Will tries encouraging Wignall to try harder. Wignall ponders everything Will's done for him thus far and uses his magic to defeat the Balkars. Wignall bows in front of Will. He tells Will he's earned his respect. Both mages shake hands and continue exploring. Will pulls out Rosty's seeker map. He explains how it and Kiki's strong sense of smell will guide them to the others, specifically Colette and Lehanna. Then, we cut away to Julius and Sion arguing over resources. Sion pulls Julius aside because he senses monsters in the area. A pack of evil sentinels arrives. Sion plans to fight them. Meanwhile, Edward protects a few students from evil sentinels that arrive on his floor level. He tells everyone to evacuate to the dungeon's 6th floor. Werkner arrives via a sky racer to pick up Edward. He then informs Edward about Kiki and wants to find Lehanna's party. Will and Wignall come across Sion and Julius. We learn Sion and Julius defeated the evil sentinels. They inform Wignall and Will that they haven't located Colette or Lehanna yet. Then, we cut away to Lehanna and Colette. Headless and his comrade Mars greet the girls. Headless tells the girls they want to destroy the Great Barrier. Before Headless attacks, the girls, Will and his group arrive. Will explains how he and the others found them. Headless attacks Will. Mars drags Headless away from the fight since he wants to focus on their main mission. Headless summons a monster named Duke with a transportation spell. The episode ends with a shot of Duke. The episode begins with the narrator explaining the 1/1000th credit rule. Then, we cut away to Will and his friends fighting the evil Grand Duke. Will and his friends head away from Duke to discuss it. Next, we cut away to Will and Sion observing several monsters. They're stationed at the top of a cliff. Julius and Colette join them seconds later. The four discuss the monsters that are following Duke's orders. Will suggests they defeat Duke. He argues once they defeat Duke, the others will yield. This means Werkner, Edward, and others from the academy can rescue them, too. Everyone is on board with Will's plan and his leadership except Julius. Will approaches Julius. He tells Julius he'll share one of Elfaria's secret techniques. Some time passes. Colette, Julius, and the others battle Duke. Julius uses Elfaria's Ars Weiss spell will taught him to combat Duke. Everyone contributes to the battle with their spell. Lahanna attempts to damage Duke with one of her spells, but Duke blocks it. Will and Kiki, his familiar, step in to assist Lahanna. Kiki tries protecting Will with a barrier, but Duke's new attack shatters Kiki's barrier and Will's goggles. Meanwhile, Edward and Werkner continue traversing the dungeon. They're still looking for Will and his allies. Simultaneously, Lahanna and the others try to develop a strategy. Lahanna and Wignall plan to go all out against Duke, much to Colette's and others' concerns. Wignall and Lahanna struggle against Duke. Will displays pessimism because Elfaria's goggles broke and Sion confronts him about his change of heart. He thanks Sion for punching some sense into him. Will gets up, walks toward his sword, and picks it up. Will fights Duke. Colette shares her stance on Will's style of courage. She assists Will in fighting Duke. Sion joins the battle seconds later. Despite their excellent teamwork and strength, Duke doesn't perish. A crystal falls in front of Will. We enter a flashback. In it, we see a woman, a baby, and an individual wearing a cloak. The woman says, "One day wand and sword will meet." Will asks Sion to use his fire magic on his sword. After Sion does so, Will uses his fire-enveloped sword to slay Duke. The episode ends with Will staring at Duke with menacing eyes. The episode begins with the same events shown in episode 11. Will uses his fire sword to slay the Grand Duke. After Will slays Duke, he crouches and ponders. Will argues he's losing strength. Wignall and the others observe Will from afar. The former's glad Will defeated Duke. Then, a group of angry monsters arrive on the battlefield. Our heroes are concerned because they used most of their strength to fight Duke. Werkner and Edward are nearby. However, Werkner and Edward don't think they'll make it in time to save our heroes. Before the monsters harm Will and his friends, Aaron, the Light Sovereign's wand, arrives and uses an annihilation spell to defeat the monsters. Will confirms Aaron is the Magia Vander's king and most powerful among the wands. Will notices Aaron and his allies have dungeon gear and wonders if this is why he's here. Aaron tells everyone they did a decent job and Will's comrades bow before Aaron. Then, a boy named Finn introduces himself to Will. Meanwhile, Headless and his ally collect a sword-like weapon of some kind. Headless is happy they completed their task and wants to hold a party to celebrate. Then, the narrator chimes in. They state that 11 faculty members lost their lives during the all-student praxis event. No students perished. The narrator confirms some folks wanted intel on Headless and his ally. However, the narrator states these folks haven't gained leads on Headless and his allies' whereabouts. Meanwhile, Colette and the others discuss the all-student praxis event in their school's hospital area. Colette's upset about the folks who died. Lahanna chimes in and says she's thankful no one from their party perished. She thanks everyone for putting in effort during the event and signals out Will, much to a few folks' disgust. Eventually, Sion confronts Will about his ability to merge Sion's fire magic into his sword. The others speculate on how Will pulled this off, while Julius yells at Will for not utilizing that trick sooner. Will's unsure, so Colette suggests asking Werkner and other staff members about it. Will brings up Finn and wonders if anyone can share more details about him with Will. Wignall and Lahanna tell Will Finn is a supporter and comes from the Finn tribe. Lahanna says the Finn tribe are magicless people. She says they have extensive knowledge of the dungeon. Lahanna claims they are guides who help mages cover new dungeon territory. Will understands. He takes a minute to ponder his dormant abilities and the Finn tribe. Later, Finn meets with Cauldron. Finn presents the Mage Slayer sword to Cauldron. Finn says he stole this weapon from an evil group he met that killed many mages. He argues the Mage Slayer wasn't a natural creation. Finn believes someone is experimenting in the dungeon. Finn says he must investigate the dungeon and wants Cauldron to analyze the Mage Slayer. Finn hops on Cauldron's desk. He's not happy Cauldron didn't tell him about Will. He argues Cauldron must look after wands while he's in charge of observing the swords. Cauldron tells Finn that Will seeks to become the Maja Vander, therefore, he seeks a wand. Finn understands and will leave Will under Cauldron and others' watchful eyes. However, Finn says he'll be checking up on everyone occasionally. Finn departs from Cauldron's office. Meanwhile, Colette spots Will outside of their school. Will's training with his sword. Colette is confused and confronts Will about his current activities. Will argues he has a goal he wants to achieve, so he must train. Lahanna and Wignall praise Will while Julius ponders what type of person Will is. Sion leaps from a window and confronts Will outside. He challenges Will to a duel. Will accepts Sion's challenge and the two fight. Will and Sion toy around on school grounds, and we receive a montage. We see familiar faces like Werkner, Finn, and others. The montage also features unnamed characters. After that, we see Will, Sion, and others attending Werkner's class. Werkner says it's been 2 months since the all-student Praxis event ended. He understands they lost many people, but doesn't want his students to become lazy. Will reflects on his goals while Werkner gives Will and the others their graduation exam test sheets. Werkner says today is the first day of the exams. Will and his friends begin the exams. The episode ends with Will saying Elfaria's name. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.